It's okay, Dad.
All right, guys. Well, welcome to the Sports Guys, to a special episode this week. We're really excited you're here with us. And we have the Honorable William Pope, our father, joining us. Welcome, Dad.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
And Rob, how you doing?
Never been better.
I like your background, a little picture from the trip we're about to talk about.
Yeah.
So we're excited this week, guys. We're going to have a very special topic for you guys. It's special to us because it's a once-in-a-lifetime trip we took in October of 2023 together. The three of us started out the trip, then we were joined by my son and his wife. And it's just one of those trips that it's hard to describe how beautiful the country of Iceland really is. So we're going to try our best to talk about Iceland, give you some little known facts about the country, show you some of the beautiful scenes that we saw, and have Dad and Rob really help us with anecdotes and stories and things they remember. We're going to do our best to really take you on this magical journey with us. And hopefully, if you watch this, you're going to want to book your own trip to Iceland soon. So anyway, guys, thanks so much. I've been really excited about this episode. The Sports Guys channel, as we've talked about, is sports, food, travel, and life. And so this is our first travel episode. So Dad, let's start with you. I want to hear from you your top three favorite things on the trip. And I know it's hard to boil it down.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you two for setting it up. I was thrilled to have a trip that I wasn't planning for once.
Right.
You all took all the work on it. And also the other thing is, even though I was in the Foreign Service and have traveled to pretty much everywhere in the world, there are individual countries and places I haven't seen. And even Foreign Service people have a bucket list. And Iceland was there, and somehow I just never quite got around to it. And you organized it, and I jumped on it. And it was everything I thought it was going to be. It's a gorgeous country, and I'd heard a lot of people, both tourists as well as Foreign Service people, talking about it, right. And how interesting it was, and how you should definitely get there at some point. It was natural beauty and all of that. It's spectacular, but I liked the people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
the people were smart and friendly, and competent, very competent. We met wonderful people. The people at the B&B out in the country, really solid mm-hmm. people. So that's one of the things that I liked and appreciated a lot. I like the waterfalls,
mm-hmm.
the land of fire and ice and waterfalls.
Right.
And particularly getting a chance to walk behind one, as you'll see in a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I liked that a lot. And I also very much liked something that I'm sure I can't pronounce properly exactly, but Jökulsárlógöf, their sort of mini Grand Canyon.
Something like that.
Whatever you call it. Yeah.
I just thought it was spectacular, and I was really glad that we could get to that one.
I love
those. Would be my three. There are many, many more, but that's the three.
Yeah, totally agree. Those are good ones. What about you, Robbie?
Well, first and foremost, the thing I like the most about this trip is that I got to go with you two guys. Two of the closest people to me on this planet, my dad and my brother, and how special of a trip that is. Looking back on those pictures today, I really got to reflect on what a special trip it was for that reason. And I'm sure everyone out there, whoever might listen to this, can think of their people that would be the ideal to go with. But in my case, this was what happened. And so I was very grateful for that. The coolest things I think we did on the trip were the ice cave was my favorite by a lot. And I really liked being able to stand at the Continental Divide where North America and Europe had split apart and left us this beautiful island of Iceland. I thought that was incredible. And I thought the hard to limit down, but going behind the falls was really spectacular.
Yep.
It was exciting. It was beautiful. It was powerful. It was so many things. And so I felt like that was a really special waterfall. It wasn't a passive watching it thing. It was more of a we're going in there. So that was just the coolest part of that waterfall. And really probably the coolest waterfall I've been a part of because of it was interactive. It was you were there, you were behind it, you were getting sprayed with the water, you were helping each other. We were all helping, like giving each other hands down rocks, and it was just cool. That was so cool. So, but there's so many other things. The food, the people. I can't highly recommend it enough. If you're thinking about going, don't think anymore. Just start putting, plans together because it's a really great country. When Dad gave the boys for Christmas a really cool map, a geographical map that goes on the wall, and it was actually it's a push pin map, and we all kind of took different colors and we put pins in all these different countries. And when I put the one in Iceland, I stood back from it for a second and I marveled at how many features this country has. And I looked at all of the other countries I've been to. I've been very fortunate because of Dad's job growing up that we got to travel a lot. And I couldn't think of a country that had as many spectacular things that was so small. It was incredible.
Right.
It's got the glaciers that you'd have to go to Switzerland to see. It's got the black volcanic ash beaches that you go to Mykonos. It's got the active volcanoes that you go to Hawaii. And this was all on this tiny little island where you could throw a paper airplane and hit the other side of it. It had so many things. The only thing it didn't have was warm beach, everything else it had.
Definitely not.
Although it had the most unique beaches you're ever going to see with the black beaches.
Putting that pin in Iceland was really, it made me just stop and think for a minute. So those are my thoughts on it.
That's great. Well, for me, it was a once in a lifetime trip because I got to take it with the two of you. None of us are getting any older, the three Pope men.
I hope we're getting older.
We're not getting younger. I mean,
I hope we're getting older.
We're all kind of geezers at this point, and how many more trips are we going to be able to take as a family? Who knows, right?
Right.
So, to me, that's why it was so special. But to me, the number one for me was the topography. I had always heard Switzerland, New Zealand, and Iceland. Those were the three most stupendous countries on Earth. I've been to two of them now, Switzerland and Iceland on this trip. New Zealand I haven't been to yet, but I do know that Iceland has something the other two don't have, and that is the incredible fields of lava, the frozen rock. I had never seen anything like that. I felt like I was on the moon walking around with our hiking boots and walking out onto the black sand beaches. The topography we saw was just stupendous.
It did look like that in some places. You're right.
It did. It really felt like it was the moon. And I see why photographers love to go to Iceland and spend weeks and weeks taking pictures all over the place. The nature there, the people, like you said, the food, the incredible sights that you see. You can see my background behind me with the Northern Lights. Rob's picture, you can see it has the ice caves that we experienced. So for me, number one was topography. Number two was waterfalls, just the most stupendous waterfalls you've ever seen. The last one we saw with Ashton and Maren, which was the really wide, big one that is really impressive, the millions of gallons of water per second. Gullfoss, I think it was called. And, just stupendous. The one we could walk behind. We're going to show you a video of that a little bit later. And then my third one, interestingly enough, was the food. I thought the food was particularly good. The lamb chops, we kept ordering it night after night after night. I was really surprised by that. I had heard Icelandic food was not particularly good. It was mostly fish. And that was not true. We enjoyed the food all the way around. It was really great.
That's a good point. I had heard going in that it was a lot of fish. There was some yogurt and some pickled shark and all kinds of stuff that I thought was going to make me feel sick. But the food, I mean, it was amazing. It was really good.
Especially the lamb.
Yeah, the lamb was amazing.
Yeah.
So good, we had it 3 nights on our 6-day trip. So you can, that's how good it was. A couple other things I mentioned, my 4 and 5, if I had 4 and 5, it'd be the black sand beaches. You just don't see that anywhere except for maybe Africa.
Greece.
It was astounding when we stepped out on the black sand beaches, and you just, on Diamond Beach, you just never see that anywhere. And then the ice
Cameroon.
caves. Oh, Cameroon, yep.
Yeah.
And then the ice caves were something you don't see very often. It was incredible, the hike we had to get down to it. That was quite challenging, but then just the beautiful sights that you see in Rob's background there, that we saw, that is just a once in a lifetime thing. So those were all my big ones. Any other big impressions you want to mention to people?
I should have included the ice cave too. That was really amazing to go down there.
It was really, really cool.
And climb down that ladder and survive it and get back up.
Yeah, that was challenging.
It was. Another little known fact we found out while we were there that's pretty cool is there's no mosquitoes in Iceland. So the whole time you're never bothered by bugs at all. It just felt so pristine. It felt like a different world.
And another thing that's wild is they have almost no trees. And what few trees they had, the Vikings cut them all down and they didn't grow back.
Yeah.
So they're having to do a bunch of work on growing forests. And there are all these little baby forests that are encircled, because what was happening was when they were trying to grow back, the sheep would all eat the saplings. So the trees would not grow back because of the sheep. So they're having to fence in these areas and grow forests out of nothing. It's kind of wild.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very true. I thought the other thing I thought Reykjavik was a very beautiful city. I didn't know what to expect really there. It was very incredibly clean, incredibly beautiful. The people were so nice. The museums were great. We had a great time at museums, both the first day and the last day. And it's a great place. I can't wait to go back. I thought it was going to be a once and done kind of situation for us, but I'm really excited about our next trip there.
I have to admit, when I saw the pictures today, I said, I can't wait to go back.
I can't wait to go back either. I'm excited.
You were talking about Reykjavik. I thought the church was one of the great church, the main church was one of the more unusual buildings I've ever seen. Never seen anything quite like it.
It was cool. Yeah. In our slideshow coming up, we have a lot of good shots from that church up top at the observation deck, and you guys will really enjoy that, I think.
Yes.
The other thing I'd mention is that I thought the hotels were very clean. So those who are thinking about going to a trip, I don't think you really can go too wrong if you get a 3 or 4 star hotel. They're reasonably priced, and they really were clean, and breakfast was typically served, and we had a nice time there. Walking around Reykjavik even at night was really nice. There were lots of cool bars. Went to the ice bar, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I thought it was just a cool city. There's cool things to do.
Yeah, it was clean. It was safe. It was awesome. Yeah.
It really was. I would say one of the best decisions we made in doing research for this trip was we decided to not take a bus tour, and we decided to do the whole thing on our own, in our own SUV. We had read many times that that's the way to do it, and it's true. You want to have your own SUV, you want to have your own car, so you can go around different areas and regions of Iceland, even stay in different places, and not be tied down by the bus situation. So I thought that was a good decision.
They did warn us frequently preparing for the trip about how if you see a gas station and you're below half, go fill up because they're kind of spread out. They're not, gas stations are not prevalent.
It's true.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point.
Last thing I wanted to mention before we get into the slideshow is the Blue Lagoon. Obviously, is an incredibly unique experience. We got to do that on our first day there. Super cool. Rob and I spent a lot of time out in the hot waters and talked to people and socialized. They had swim up bars. They had a swim up bar where not only could you get a drink, but they had a different swim up bar where you could get mud to put on your face and give yourself a facial, and
with minerals. And the only thing they told you not to do is go underwater with your hair. So that was the only thing we had to avoid. But otherwise, we had just a blast. I know Dad was trying to find us the whole time. He was in the building looking out the window trying to find us, but we were just way out there in the middle of
Blue Lagoon most of the time.
Yeah, they tell you not to wear jewelry because it'll petrify in the minerals, and they tell you not to get your hair wet. In fact, they recommend that you put conditioner, like you would wear in a shower, on there to help from solidifying your hair if you get some water on there, because it's a crazy. The water itself is extremely
Mhm.
mineral filled and does a lot of weird stuff to your hair. But
That's
the
right.
water was so warm; it was just gorgeous in there.
Had you seen
Steam rising
anything
off
like
it.
Had you seen anything like that before, Dad? The Blue Lagoon?
One place in Italy, not too far out of Rome, was something like it, but no, not
Wasn't
exactly.
wasn't Bath kind of like it? Bath, England?
That,
Hmm.
no, I don't think so.
The Roman
Not
baths,
like
yeah.
that.
I
No,
thought it
They didn't.
was.
They don't have the
nowhere near
thermal
as
activity.
extensive.
Yeah.
Nowhere near as extensive, I don't think, as the size of
Mm.
the Blue Lagoon. And
Yeah,
the
I
Blue
would
Lagoon
color,
was amazing.
I would
color's
mention that
amazing.
I would mention since our trip, we got kind of lucky because pretty soon after we left, there have been multiple volcano eruptions,
Yeah.
explosions,
Yes.
all down in the Keflavik airport area, all around Blue Lagoon. They've closed Blue Lagoon twice now, one time for a whole
No,
month.
I think 4 times.
Is it 4 times? Okay. And
Yeah.
so we got very lucky. So I would recommend if you're planning your trip, there's a couple things you have to get tickets ahead of time for. We got the Blue Lagoon tickets 4 months in advance. And I also got the Northern Light bus tour in advance as well. There's a couple of other things they recommend that you do in advance, but definitely Blue Lagoon. It books up, sometimes 6 months in advance. So some of those really big excursions like that, make sure you do your homework and make sure it's open, first of all. But second of all, you get your tickets in advance. All right, well, let's go take a look at the slideshow. We're going to give you some little known facts about Iceland. And we'll talk through it. I'm going to ask these two fine gentlemen to help me facilitate this here. So our trip to the magical country of Iceland, we're going to give you some little known facts about the island. As you see here on the map, there's 8 regions, which I was not aware of, but there's 8 regions total in Iceland. It's in the northwest of Europe in the North Atlantic Ocean. As Rob mentioned, sitting in between the Americas and Europe on the continental divide. And I was glad you mentioned that, Rob, as one of the highlights was being able to stand right there on the divide with 1 foot in Americas and 1 foot in Europe. What a unique experience there.
Mm-hmm.
And my understanding is where we stood was one place to see it, and there's another one that's further up. If you feel like a real good hike, you can hike another mile up the trail, and there's a spot there you can take a photo op sitting right on the fault line, but it's a little bit of a hike. So most active thermal environment in the world with the most active volcanoes. So that's really interesting. You have this little island that's the size of Ohio that has the most active volcanoes in the world. And as we've mentioned, there have already been a couple explosions since we left in October. So
It's been 4, yeah.
40,000 square miles, capital of Reykjavik. People mostly Viking and Scandinavian in origin, and the Icelandic language, which I don't know how you guys felt, but I felt it was incredibly interesting listening to it. I don't know, Dad, if you felt like it sounded like Sweden or Swedish or not, but
A bit, but they were so isolated for so long out there that it
Yeah.
really developed. It developed in its own way. Norwegian, Danish, and Swedish are not so super different from each other, and they're mutually intelligible. I think if you asked your sister Emily, she would say that Icelandic is really very different from the other
yes.
3.
Yeah, that was my impression, was that it was very different. And you see my note here about Icelandic language being the closest to the old Viking language that we still have on Earth. So and maybe that's because of what you talked about, that it's such an isolated island and the population's been isolated for hundreds of years.
Yeah, there
So
wasn't a lot of intermingling with Europe, you know?
right,
You kind of
exactly,
stood alone.
exactly. Some basic facts on Iceland. It was first settled in 874 by the Viking people that came over via ship. I think they were actually looking for Greenland at the time. It's actually known as the land of fire and ice, which is pretty obvious. Half the island is ice or glacier, and half the island is some kind of volcanic eruption. So, pretty good term for the island there. Capital of Reykjavik, like we mentioned. National anthem is Lofsöngur, which I actually listened to yesterday in preparing for this program. It's a pretty good score, I thought. Apparently, they played it when the Icelandic national team made it to the World Cup in 2018. I don't remember it, but it's a pretty good score. Pretty good song, I thought. Official language is Icelandic. Common energy source, geothermal energy, which is a very interesting fact there. They've got over 85% of the homes in Iceland now are powered by geothermal energy, which is a renewable source. Pretty cool factoid there that they don't need a lot of energy like most countries do. What are you guys' thoughts about that?
Oh, it's a great thing. It's a great thing.
Yeah.
Once you have amortized the installation of it, digging the pipes down and installing, it's essentially free heat.
Yeah.
Right. You remember we kept looking at those factories, Rob? They were right next to Blue Lagoon, and we kept trying to figure out what they were.
Yeah.
And we finally eventually figured it out with the smoke billowing out of the stacks. And
The steam.
these
Yeah.
are, these are just big geothermal plants that capture the energy and turn it into electricity. So
Hmm.
very, very cool. Majority of Icelanders can speak a lot of languages. They said the average Icelander speaks at least 4 languages. And English is taught in all schools there. So English is one of those languages.
Yeah, I was surprised at how much English everyone spoke until our guide spoke to that. Our guide who took us into the ice caves talked about how his grandson learned English before he learned Icelandic because the Americans had an Air Force base there for a long time. And they only pulled out fairly recently. I'm not sure exactly when, 90s or something, 2000s.
Yeah, more recent than the 90s.
Yeah, and so because the Air Force Base was there, they were piping in a lot of American television, and so a lot of little kids in Iceland would sit
Yes.
down and learn English by watching television,
Right.
and they would actually learn that before they learned Icelandic. So many of them spoke really, really good English, and
Mhm.
he attributed a lot of that. Not only do they study it in school, but they get a head start on with American TV. So I found that really interesting.
That is interesting.
It was more Americanized than what most of Europe is. I felt
Very
like
much, very much so.
there's
Very
a
much.
more of an American influence.
Yeah, and you remember, Dad, we did translate some of our money into Icelandic krona. I think, is that how you say it, krona?
Krona, yeah. Yep.
Krona. But we didn't really use much of it. Everybody accepted either euros or dollars. Pretty much, we spent dollars everywhere we went. So
Mostly electronic.
and electronic. Yeah,
Money.
they really very, very modern in terms of their ability to take card everywhere, even out in the
Yeah.
They
sticks.
don't use cash as much.
Right. That's right.
We did learn though that you have to use credit cards at the gas stations. You can't use a debit card.
Yeah, we had a very strange experience our first time we filled up. Rob was struggling. I was struggling. We're trying to get cards to work. We had another group next to us who were Asians that they were struggling. We kind of all worked together to get both cars filled up somehow.
We ended
So-
up paying for theirs on our card,
Right.
and they paid us cash. I think it
Right.
was.
That's right, because they couldn't get any of their cards to work.
They-
So really,
Their cards weren't working.
if you're planning your trip to Iceland, make sure you think about the way you're going to do payment and make sure you have credit cards that have availability so you can make sure you can pay for things.
Yeah, because the gas stations are weird. The pumps themselves are independent pumps. They don't have anything to do with the little store that's there. So you
Right.
can't go buy gas inside.
One little anecdote, all the gas stations there, Rob really liked this. He really wanted to try lamb hot dogs. And we would go into the places, fill up, and then we would go in and get some lamb hot dogs. And the lamb hot dogs
Oh,
were
yeah.
fantastic. I thought they were really
They were
good.
so good.
I loved them. So,
Yeah.
again, I think we're lamb fans now. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the major historical facts in Iceland's history: in 1918, Iceland declared its independence and became known as the Kingdom of Iceland. 7 years before that, they had opened up their first university, the University of Iceland, which actually still operates today in Reykjavik. In 1945, they had their first Icelandic aircraft international flight from Keflavik Airport. 46, Iceland joined the United Nations as a full member. 63, there was a volcanic eruption. It was so large south of Iceland that it created a new island called Surtsey, which you can find on a detailed Iceland map. I actually looked it up last night. It's a little tiny island, but pretty amazing that it was created by one volcanic eruption. There was another one in 73, 10 years later, that erupted in the small island of Jaime, I guess it's called, which is the only other island that's inhabited west of Iceland itself. So apparently a bunch of people died and there was a bunch of destruction there. And then in 2000, Iceland celebrated 1,000 years of Christianity on the island, which was a major celebration. They had a big parade, and apparently they had representatives from the Vatican come, and it was a big deal. So any thoughts about this slide?
Just had a
Not really.
very interesting history.
No,
Obviously,
good.
this is the history that really is more modern day history. We learned a lot in the Perlan Museum about some of the Viking history that goes all the way back to the 800s. And, you know, it changed hands multiple times. Sometimes the Norwegians had it. Sometimes the Danish had it. You know, the
Well, it
Viking.
started out the Norwegians had it, and
Right.
then the Danes took over and really have had a big influence on them because they're very tied to them financially. There's a lot of
Mhm.
financial ties between the Danes and the Icelandic.
It's true. Very
But it
much so.
also was a major launching base to go west.
Right.
Greenland and what's now North America.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. And do you remember, Dad, when we were getting the SUV checked out the first day, they were telling us about how Iceland had essentially been a large Air Force base for the United States for many, many years. During
Yes.
World War II and after World War II, it was a major base. So it makes a lot of sense because it's right in between the United States and where
Yeah.
we needed to be, which is France and
Perfect
Germany.
strategically. Yeah.
Perfect spot, yes.
And so apparently we're still paying them for land there for some of our planes and other equipment. Population, this surprised me. I thought it was a little more than this, but 377,689 in 2024. That's a slight increase from 2023 of 0.63%. 81% of the population is in Reykjavik and the suburbs. So you only have 19% of the people outside of Reykjavik. The Icelandic population being the youngest in Europe with an average of 36 years old. I think
that's a surprising statistic for me.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Most of European countries have a negative growth rate. It's nice to think about Iceland's not only young, but they're growing in population.
Right.
That's pretty cool.
It is cool. And, you know, it seems like Reykjavik is a kind of a hip city. I think young people are going there now. Remember, we met a lot of people from Sweden and from Germany, and there were Americans there, and people were going to school there. A little bit of a hip city, I think. So,
yeah, agreed.
Becoming a little younger.
Yes.
78% Christians, 14% other religions. So that was interesting. Climate. This was interesting to me, and we experienced this when I was there. One of the delights I had, I thought it was going to feel like Minnesota. I spent a year in Minnesota as a consultant and experienced minus 20 degree weather without wind chill. So I know what that feels like. Iceland definitely was not that to me. Because of the Gulf Stream, it has cool summers, but it also had relatively mild winters, 32 degrees and up. At least that's the way I felt about it. Dad did mention the wind obviously made it a lot colder, but the Gulf Stream,
Yeah, the wind,
because Iceland's right in front of the Gulf Stream, and the Gulf Stream comes in, makes it much more moderate than maybe it would be otherwise. What are you guys' thoughts?
the wind was very memorable. It was powerful.
Yeah.
Yes, it was almost knocking us over at times.
But you
Yeah.
guys would agree it was not as cold as I was expecting.
No.
No,
Pure temperature.
and not as blocked in by ice or snow and all of that.
Right.
Right.
We only had 1 out of the 6 days. Remember, Rob, you were driving the whole time, where we had snowy roads and we had to kind of be careful, but because it had snowed overnight.
Yeah.
One thing I mentioned here is we talked about the windy and cool winters. We have the damp and wet summers. So the summers there, although moderate, apparently have even more precipitation than the rest of the year. And kind of like Florida, where you get a 30-minute rain every afternoon. Apparently, Icelanders just get used to it. Every day, you're going to have a little bit of precipitation of some kind coming down. And they're always prepared. So Icelanders are used to having to peel off and then put back on, peel off, put back on. Always have their rain gear at the ready, I guess you could say. So do you guys think we packed right? Did we prepare right?
Yeah. We needed our outer shells pretty frequently.
Yes. Yeah, I was very happy with. We took pretty small amount. I did, and
Yep.
but luckily I hit the right things.
You brought the right stuff. Yeah. I
Yes.
agree with that. I never felt really wet or cold. I really felt pretty good. We had our gloves. So we,
Yeah.
again, do your research, get prepared, make sure you take the right equipment, the right gear.
But Rob's right about the rain shell. No matter how
Yes.
cold it is, you can have a couple of layers of coats underneath if you need it. But on top of it, you got to have the rain shell to keep you dry.
Yeah, and good waterproof boots.
And boots.
That was important. Because you're going to do
Completely agree.
hiking and you're going to be experiencing rains out of nowhere sometimes.
That's true. Geothermal energy, we've talked a little bit about this. You'll see these pictures in our slideshow coming up in a minute. But we saw these pictures all over the country with plumes of smoke coming up out of the ground everywhere we went. And it's just steam being released. You can see here, they consider it a renewable resource, an inexpensive way to power your home. And like we mentioned earlier, 85% of Icelandic homes are now heated and cooled on geothermal energy, which is really a cool stat. So the Great Geyser, or as Dad called it, Geyser, and you'll see in the pictures some pictures of the family geyser next to the Great Geyser sign. On the left there, there's a great geyser, and then there's a couple of geysers around it that are a little smaller but are more active. This one, that's the great one, shoots water up to 60 meters in the air. Not as active it has been in past years, but a couple 100 meters away, there's a geyser that erupts every 10 minutes or so. We actually went to that one, and we were very lucky. And in one of the videos we'll show, it erupted twice for us within about a minute, and it was really a cool experience. What were you guys' thoughts about the Great Geyser and that surrounding area in the Golden Circle?
Impressive.
Yeah, it was spectacular. And one thing that I remember walking up toward the geyser, I looked to my left and I saw some smoldering steam coming out of one of the little hot spring little pools. And
Right.
I looked closer and the thing was boiling. It was rolling like you'd see in a pot of boiling water.
Right.
And that water looked like it was the hottest water I've ever seen in my life.
Right.
And it was just boiling water in this little hole.
They said that when it's 20 feet below the surface, it's 500 degrees. And then when it gets up to the surface, it goes down to 250 degrees, which of course would completely scald you.
Yeah.
If you touched it, but it's about 250 when it comes out. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And then we spent that day all around the Golden Circle with Ashton and Maren. We were so happy they joined us from England for a couple of days, and we got to see the Kerrid Crater, which is a volcanic crater in Iceland that was formed 3,000 years ago when the magma chamber of the volcano collapsed after an eruption. And of course, this was part of a whole crater complex in that area. And we had the opportunity and the privilege to go around the entire rim of this thing, which was a really cool hike and a really fun way to see it. What did you guys think of the Kerrid volcano and the rim?
One of the more spectacular things we saw, I thought.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah,
It
I
was
thought it was.
very beautiful to the eye, and it was
Yes.
also just impressive.
Yep, agreed. Definitely put it on your schedule if you're thinking about going to Iceland, because this was a fantastic couple of
Yes.
items, all
It's a
in the
good
golden.
point because it's a good point because one of the main things you're going to do in any tour that you take, anywhere you go, anybody talks to you about Iceland, they're going to talk to you about the Golden Circle. But it is very easy to go along the top part of the Golden Circle and not come around the bottom part and hit the Carrot Crater. So if you don't do the full circle, you're going to miss the Carrot Crater. So I recommend go on and do the entire circle instead of just going along where the top part has most of the things on it. So
Right.
it's easy to not bother with coming south. And I recommend going south and making sure you stop at this crater.
Agreed.
Yes.
Very, very cool. So Dad, this is your slide. We
Ah,
had we got the opportunity to go to the largest canyon in Iceland. And can you say this name for us, Dad?
no.
Go cool
Looks like Jörg with the umlauts would be Jökulsar Gjulfur, something like that.
Okay.
Glufur.
But it had been carved out of the ground for millions of years. It has shaped this powerful glacier river. Sometimes in the deep winter, you'll see pieces of glacier, pieces of ice floating down the river. It's 25 kilometers long, 500 meters wide, and 100 meters deep. They call it the Grand Canyon of Iceland. Of course, it's much
Yeah,
smaller than the real Grand Canyon, but that's what they call it. We
but it
had
was spectacular.
such a wonderful opportunity. We were staying in Hunabakar, which is a little town nearby with a really cool camp, and we'll show you in the video the
Mhm.
camp where we stayed. But this was very close by, and we had the real opportunity to go hike pretty much the whole thing. But what were you guys' thoughts about this canyon that we saw?
Absolutely cannot miss if you go.
We
It's
could
a
have
month.
easily missed this because we didn't really pick up on it in our research.
We
And
didn't.
luckily, we stayed at a really cool place that had cabins, and we got to know the owner's daughter who was working there, and she recommended that we check it out. And she said there's this place close by, and we just kind of said, okay, well, maybe we'll see it, maybe we won't. Little did we know that it was one of the more spectacular things we were going to see on the trip.
It was so cool. She said you couldn't miss it, like Dad said. But what was
Yeah,
funny is she kind of, even though she said you couldn't miss it, I guess because she lived there and she's Icelandic,
yeah,
and she kind of shrugged and she was like, "Well, they call it the Icelandic Grand Canyon, and I really think you should see it." But she was just much more casual about it than we were when we saw it. It was
yeah.
stupendous.
But I think if it weren't for her, we wouldn't have seen it.
Right?
You know.
Absolutely. So this was one of your.
Spectacular and absolutely not to be missed.
Correct.
So this was one of your favorites, Dad.
Yes. Right
Some
up at
other
the top.
interesting facts about Iceland on the left there. We got the most largest waterfall and glacier in Europe. Its capital is cleanest in the world, which I thought was very interesting.
I believe that.
You can eat off the streets from what we saw. Longest human lifespan on Earth. The first female president in the world. I thought, Dad, you found that very interesting. Finn Bogator, I think's her name.
Buga Dotir.
Finn Bogator.
Finnbog's daughter. Finnbog's daughter.
Okay. Finn
See that
Bogator. Okay.
Dotir at the end?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Vigdis Finnboga Dotir.
Very good, Dad. You know Icelandic.
Right.
Here's a map of Iceland, just to give you an idea. You can see down here on the left side, I'll use my mouse. We landed in this region here, which is Keflavik, where the airport is. Over here is where the Blue Lagoon is, and where this little inlet here is where a lot of the latest volcanic activity has been,
Mhm.
which is why they've been having a lot of problems with having to cancel flights, why they've had to shut down the Blue Lagoon a couple of times. It's actually not that far from Reykjavik, which is only about 40 minutes away right here. But we spent the first day or two here, and then spent the next couple of days leaving Reykjavik and going down along this southern coast and coming all the way out here to Skotadalfell and Jökulsárlón, which is the big glacier lake, which is right here. You'll see pictures of that here in a bit. And then, of course,
Diamond Beach.
Diamond Beach, yep, which is also right here. It's right across from the glacier lake. So this was the furthest east we got, was here at the glacier lake. We also, of course, on the fourth day went back to Reykjavik and spent some time here at the Guyz and the Golden Circle, which is this region here. So that gives you an idea of kind of the west, south, and east part of the country that we saw. And you can see how much of the country we did not see and why we want to go back.
And I think we had to decide in limited amount of time how to maximize the most important pieces. And I think if anybody was to do a similar trip, I would recommend doing it the way we did it, which is concentrate on the southern part of the country. If you have longer, I would definitely go north, and we're excited about going back there one day, and maybe doing the entire circle road around the entire country, which would be amazing. But I think if you're on limited time, focus in the south.
They actually call it Route 1, and it starts in Reykjavik, and it goes essentially the entire length of the island all around here. It's called Route 1. And they recommend 10 days to see all of Iceland.
Probably 2 weeks. Yeah.
It's about 10 days to do the whole thing. And people who do the ring road, they call it the ring road, will often rent an RV or a small RV or some kind of camper. And then they just stay in the camper and do major hikes as they go. So that's a cool way to do it. 3 most popular sports in Iceland are ice hockey is number 1. Soccer number 2, and you can see that up top there was one of the more miraculous things in sports. In 2018, just 4 years ago, Iceland qualified for the World Cup, went through the whole qualifying tournament and made it. And so this little country of 350,000 had a World Cup team, which is really astounding. Their third favorite sport is handball. I remember, Dad, in Yugoslavia when we were there, that was very popular in Eastern Europe.
Very popular in Yugoslavia.
You remember a lot of times you and Mom would pop on the TV and handball would be on. That was their sport.
Yeah. Rukomet.
Exactly. Yeah. Some tips for travelers in winter. You can see the northern lights. As we mentioned earlier, you really need under 34 degrees to be able to see it. This is why people who want to see the northern lights go in October, November, December, January. Those months is the best time to be able to see the northern lights. So that's just one tip there. Tip 2 would be you can hike up near the volcanoes. There's all kinds of hiking trails that the country of Iceland has created now for people who want to get really close to the molten lava. But I would say do your research, and there's actually an app you can download on your phone now that shows you all the different hiking trails that are around the active volcanoes in Iceland. So you can map out and plan out your trip. And then also,
I've heard mixed reviews on the seeing volcanoes, because I had a friend who went there and had a great experience. I also read in the a lot of the prep work going into the trip that there were oftentimes so much weird clouds that roll in because of their unpredictable weather, that oftentimes they'll be on a tour and the clouds will roll in and block the view that you're looking down on a volcano from another high point. So you want to be really careful about being aware that might happen.
Yeah, no, that's true.
But if it goes well, it's really cool.
I would also say that people try to do most of these really big hiking excursions in the summer. There's a reason for that. It gets really miserable if you're hiking long distances and it's 20 degrees. So if you're planning one of these big hiking trips up to one of the active volcanoes, also likely want to try to do it when it's a little bit more moderate temperature-wise. Tip number 3, we've talked about the Blue Lagoon and planning out and getting tickets for that way in advance. At least 4 or 5 months in advance, you want to try to get those tickets. So what are the Northern Lights? Northern Lights are an atmospheric phenomenon. They're regarded the holy grail of sky watching, or they call it the Aurora Borealis. And
Or
it,
Aurora Borealis.
Aurora
Oh,
Borealis,
yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
And it occurs at 34 degrees or lower, so really cold times of the year. What was interesting to me in reading this research was it comes from energized particles from the sun that slam into the Earth's upper atmosphere at 45 million miles per hour. And essentially, these little particles would tear us apart and all animals apart. We wouldn't be able to sustain those particles hitting us, but our planet's magnetic field protects us from the onslaught and bends those streams of particles either to the right or to the left. And that bending of those particles and the light generated from it is what causes the aurora borealis. So that was really interesting to think about those particles coming in at 45 million miles per hour.
They had a very interesting presentation on Aurora Borealis at Perlan in the museum.
Yes, they did.
Really well done.
Other thing I want to mention here is the Earth's magnetic field redirects the particles towards both poles. And so because of that, there's actually southern lights. And I think, Dad, you said you didn't realize this either. I didn't know that.
I did not. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, and the southern lights can be seen in 4 major countries: New Zealand, Australia, Argentina, and Antarctica. So very interesting that there's southern lights as well that you can pursue if you're an adventurer. So Northern Light tours, this is just from our advice and our experience. Make sure you review the ratings on each tour that you're considering. We had a pretty harrowing experience, I would say, on the bus tour that we took. I know that I was holding on for dear life the entire time. The bus driver was a very fast driver in not great conditions. So that was number one. Number two, you really want to look at the package and what it's covering, you know, what the price is, and is it giving you transportation, food, hot chocolate, other things. To really understand what the package is. And then the thing that Rob recommended to us, and we did not do, we didn't take his advice, do the excursion early in your trip, like day 1 or day 2, because often it happens where you'll go out there one night and you don't see the Northern Lights, and the tour company will give you a second chance. You can go a couple days later and go again and go try to see those Northern Lights later in your itinerary. And of course, that happened to us. We waited until the last night we were there. We did not see the Northern Lights, unfortunately, and we should have taken Rob's advice. What are you guys' thoughts on this?
Agreed.
I agree with me.
I agree with you. Were you guys white knuckling it the way I was?
Yeah, it was terrifying.
Yeah,
The vehicle was really tall and thin and really top heavy and was swaying dramatically in the wind. I thought we were going to go over. I thought we were in for it.
It felt like it a couple of times. The wind was so heavy. It wasn't just his driving, but mostly his driving, but not only the wind. The whole time we were there, the wind was terrible.
It also felt a little different when we were in the SUV because we could control it, and the roads are not that big. And in that big, massive bus, swaying back and forth, it was terrifying. I don't get scared very often, but I was very scared on that trip.
Yeah, I don't get scared much. That was a lot.
I was starting to think about, was I going to see my kids again? Was I going to see my grandkids again? Was my will up to date? It was really pretty interesting.
I thought it was 50-50 that we were going to be in a pretty bad accident, honestly.
Yeah, it felt like that. So let's take a look at our 6-day itinerary. We went, again, October of 2023 last year. We started planning this I look back, Rob, our first sketch was February of 2023. So we essentially planned this thing for about 9 months. And we flew out of Raleigh, Durham Airport on October 5th. Flew all night, slept on the plane, and arrived on October 6th to Keflavik Airport. We got our SUV. We drove the 40 minutes to Reykjavik, kind of drove around downtown a little bit, and then immediately went on our museum tour. at the Perlan Museum, which is a great way to start your
Yeah.
time in Iceland, because it's laid out Perlan in a way that it shows you all the great parts of Iceland in a museum. So what did you guys think about Perlan as the lead off thing we did?
Ideal.
It's a perfect way to start getting your arms
Exactly.
around what you're going to be seeing.
Right.
Exactly
Completely
the
agree.
way to start. You were right on the mark there.
Yeah, agreed. So then after that tour, we kind of were excited about what the 6 days were going to be like. We had an idea what was coming. We then went into Reykjavik because we couldn't check into our hotel yet until 4 o'clock. And so we went and found Reykjavik Roasters, a really cool coffee shop where we parked and went in. It was a little chilly. I went in and got a hot chocolate and a little muffin and just chatted a little bit about all the cool things that were coming our way. And then very shortly after that, walked to a church nearby and did the church tour, which I thought was stupendous. I think that was one of your favorite things, Dad.
Yes.
That incredible church right in the middle of Reykjavik. Leif Erikson having a statue right out front. He was a very important historical figure in their history. And then that afternoon, we drove back towards the airport to the Blue Lagoon, and we did the Blue Lagoon soak, and we ate dinner at the Blue Lagoon. That was really good dinner there. And then that night, we wandered into Reykjavik, walked around, and found the ice bar, and got ourselves a cocktail and enjoyed the ice bar there. So great first day. Day 2, winter waterfalls, black sand beaches, and Vik. So we left Reykjavik and drove along the southern trail, Route 1, all the way to Vik and to the black sand beaches and waterfalls. Along the way, saw several big waterfalls, which you'll see in the slideshow. What an incredible day that was. I thought that might have been my favorite day, I think, number 2, even though they all were great. But I really enjoyed exploring with you guys those great waterfalls.
Yep.
Then we had day 3, the Glacier Lake tour, the ice cave tour, looking all around the Glacier Lagoon. We saw Diamond Beach that day. We did a lot of really cool things on day 3 as well in the Glacier Lake region. And then day 4, having stayed in the camp 2 nights, we made our way back to Reykjavik, seeing some really cool sights along the way. And then we went straight to the National Museum of Iceland, which I thought was really well done. There was a lot of really cool artifacts in the National Museum of Iceland. We got to learn a lot more about the history of the island. What were you guys' thoughts about the National Museum of Iceland?
Another can't miss, must not miss.
Yeah, I think both museums were very well done, and it was important to see Perlan first before you get started, and then you added a lot of the history at the National Museum. So I was glad we did both of those.
That's right. And then that evening, Ashton and Maren flew in from England. We met up with them. We got them settled in the hotel. And that night we went to the Viking bar and we all had a Viking beer. And that was one of the best tasting beers I've ever had.
Yeah, it
and
really was.
And it was our 3rd night in a row of having lamb chops. We had them 3 nights in a row, which was pretty amazing. But they were just so good.
What's amazing is beer was illegal in Iceland until I think it was 1993 or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely.
You think of the Scandinavians can really drink their vodka and drink, but not Iceland. They weren't big fans of alcohol.
Very true. And then, of course, day 5 with Ashton.
Oh, by the way, we had our 4th night in a row of lamb.
Yeah, that's what I just mentioned. Day 5, we took Ash and Maren with us in the SUV. We all packed into that SUV. I don't know how, Dad, you were able to make it back there with Ash and Maren, but we packed in and we went and explored the Golden Circle. And you've already seen some of the things that we saw there. And we'll show you in our slideshow the really cool photos from Golden Circle. Thoughts about that?
again, I sound like a broken record, but again, can't miss. They're just within reach of Reykjavik. Is the Golden Circle, I think. Yep, you just have to do it.
I think when people have even more limited time than what we did, and they're given, okay, you can do 2 days or 3 days, they'll do just the Golden Circle. So that's how important that is.
Right.
It's a quick circle that goes around and hits a bunch of things, and it highlights, it accentuates a few of their biggest things, their biggest waterfall, the geysers, the Carrot Crater, and some other things.
You know what's interesting is we left early that morning on the Golden Circle tour, and I felt like we used every minute that day that we could, and I still felt like we were pressing at the end to try to get it all in. There's a lot to see at the Golden Circle if you want to see it all.
Yeah, we barely made the Carrot Crater. I think they were going to be closing.
Yeah,
within 30 minutes.
That's right.
There's a lot to do. There's a lot to do. So, highly recommend you get a very early start on that day for sure. And then, of course, Northern Lights tour we mentioned. We went on that. Unfortunately, unsuccessful in viewing the Northern Lights. And then, of course, next day was departure.
But we made it home alive.
Yes,
So
we did. I don't know how. I don't know how. And then looking ahead to the next trip, some of the things that we didn't get done and we were really excited to do again. Obviously, Northern Lights would be one of them, but we wouldn't get that done in the summer. In the summer, we'd like to do whale watching. There's some really incredible whale watching tours there. Glacier hiking and snowmobiling. We didn't get that done either. So we very much like to try that. There's a light plane that goes from southern Iceland to northern Iceland, and then you can actually pick up an SUV up in northern Iceland and finish the trip home. That'd be a really cool circle to do. We would like to hike to an active volcano. That'd be a really cool experience. Usually most people try to do it in the summer. And then one thing Ashton and Maren did that we didn't get to do, and that was the Yoda cave from Star Wars. There's a special cave there in southern Iceland near Vik that is called the Yoda cave, and it's been used in multiple Star Wars movies for scenes with Yoda as he's training one of his Padawans. So we didn't get to do that one either. Any other ones you guys would love to do on trip 2?
The north, just generally the north.
North, seeing the puffins.
Yeah, the puffins.
Yes. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah. I'd like to do the ring road, to be honest.
Yes.
Yeah, the ring road.
All the way around, ideally, if you have time.
Yeah, that's right. You know, Rob, you keep talking about buying a camper. Well, maybe you should wait and rent a camper over there and do the ring road.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. Well, we're going to go to our slideshow now. You guys ready to look at it?
Yeah.
I did a special slideshow for you guys, and I did it really thinking of the two of you and Ash and Maren, really everybody who was on this trip with us. And so this is our special show. We're going to stop it and pause it at certain places as we think of anecdotes or stories we want to tell. But here we go. This is 950 photos compressed down into just under 200. So here you go. That was the SUV that we talked about, the hot chocolate.
Yeah, with the homemade whipped cream on it.
Oh, man. So good. I love these little streets there. Incredible. There's Leif Erikson.
There's the church.
Yeah. By the way, did you know, Dad, that the United States gave this to the people of Iceland in 1946?
I didn't know that until we were there. No.
I thought that was really interesting that the U.S. Gave that statue and that dedication to Leif. Very interesting. Discoverer of Vinland it must have been what they called it back then. Vinland.
Yes.
This is that stupendous church and the views from the stupendous church up top. And that bell. You can see out to the ocean, just incredible. And the mountains behind it. Just astonishing, the views.
Now we're at Perlan, the museum.
So this was pretty cool. That's Rob and that's Dad. And there's literally a full ice cave recreation inside the museum, the Perlan Museum. And we got to
Right.
go through
Artificial,
artificial.
but it gives you a good idea
But wasn't that cool that
of
we were
what
able
they're
to
like.
have that preview? Yeah. It was neat.
A lot easier to get through that one than it was the later one.
Yeah.
This is what the glaciers look like from up above. Really astounding. So beautiful. That was from that cafe, Dad, up top.
Yes.
Look at that. It can't really be described, the beauty, until you see it. Don't you think?
Yeah, that museum was very helpful in showing us a lot of what we were going to be seeing. And I think this was right when we had lunch. Now we move to the Blue Lagoon.
Yeah, we had lunch at the museum.
Yeah.
Do you see all the thermal energy you see everywhere? That was really interesting.
This is Grindavik. This is
Grindavik.
where they've had 4 massive eruptions in the last 6 months.
Right.
And we went back to Reykjavik, and here we are at the ice bar, where everything was ice except for the ceiling and the floor.
Yep.
Table, the glass we were drinking out of, everything. It's ice.
Everything. I love this bench, Dad, for some reason. And all the colors. Colors are beautiful.
Yeah, they have pretty colored houses.
This shows you what you see everywhere in the country is this thermal energy coming out of everywhere. And,
well, no, those are all hot spring.
Yeah, exactly. Just thermal being released everywhere, all over the country. Just look how gorgeous that is. It's astounding.
Gorgeous in a barren kind of way. There are very few trees.
Here's the first one.
There's no trees except for the ones they grow.
This was Selfoss, the first waterfall we went to. And you can see we can walk behind it. This is when we hiked all the way up to it, to back behind it. Really incredible sound. And you'll hear it here in a video here in a minute.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite things.
Me too.
I put my GoPro on and got some pretty good shots.
That was a good purchase for the trip. They had all these little waterfalls everywhere. I thought it was so cool. Everywhere you went, a little waterfall.
Yeah, these are all in the same area as Selfoss.
Doesn't that look a little bit, Dad, like the upper Northwest? I know you and Julie have spent some time up there. A little bit of the snow-capped stuff up in Washington.
A bit.
Yeah.
A bit. There are a lot more trees in the Northwest.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Very
it's
barren.
wild. There were no trees.
Spectacular
There's the
trees,
sheep.
but
See the sheep up there?
We went miles and miles and miles and never saw any trees.
This is the second waterfall called Skogafoss, which was the really stupendous waterfall too. And it had black sand beaches right next to it. It was amazing. There's Robbie. Gorgeous.
I think, isn't this the one that has the most water going over it?
No.
Probably that one we saw later.
That's Gullfoss.
Much bigger.
I know the other one was bigger, but I think this one actually had more water going over it.
Maybe.
Yeah. I remember reading it was surprising.
Now, the one thing I'll mention here, though, is this was the toughest hike we did on the whole trip. And you'll see this is up on the hike we're doing here on this trail. And there were many,
it was a lot of steps.
Hundreds and hundreds of steps. I was very gassed by the time we made it up there. I'm surprised I made it, actually. It was really tough.
It was hard.
I'm glad we
That was a hard workout.
Well, that's the view when you finally get up towards the top.
That was upstream. So if you look to your left there, that's where the waterfall was.
And this
Tom
picture right
was
here,
so, Tom was so funny.
I was funny. This picture, Rob is about a foot from falling to his death, Dad. And this is probably the second time in my life I've felt like I'm turning into you, Dad, because I'm not a
Yeah.
warrior and you are. But I kept telling him to please come a little closer and get not so close to the edge. And he kept saying, "Don't worry about it, don't worry about it." But it was really he was
My
close to
footing felt firm, so I was fine.
his death right there. This amazing area, all these coastal areas near Vic.
You know what's interesting too is there's a high population of swans.
Yes,
A lot of swans in Iceland.
but you see why the photographers love it. This is that cool lighthouse. You guys walking up the lighthouse.
Yes. That was
Yeah.
very strange. It looked like a fort in Morocco or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How beautiful that is.
That reminds me of a place that in Cyprus. It looked just like that.
Yes.
But this was the
There's
most
Robbie.
beautiful black beach. Is this wide, just black beach, powder beach. It was amazing.
Could you believe the black beaches here though? It was astounding. All over Iceland. And they
And
mentioned to us.
and the sand felt a little different because it was volcanic ash.
Yeah. Yeah.
It felt just a little more powdery.
It looked like it was right out of a Star Wars movie. It really did. I definitely want to go back to that area again. Dad, you kept your Sweeten hat on the whole time.
That's because it was the warmest thing I had.
That's right.
And I
That
needed
was the
every
first.
bit of it.
That was the first rainbow we saw. Oh, there you go.
Oh, there it is.
The first night we got pork chops.
Oh,
My
God.
grilled lamb. Oh,
Boy, they were good. See how beautiful the sunset and sunrises were. Just as incredible. Look at that, little waterfalls everywhere we went, even non-famous ones.
Yes.
yeah. Some of the advice we saw was, or we heard was, don't go chasing waterfalls like that song, because you'll see so many that you don't want to disrupt your pattern of travel just to go see a specific waterfall necessarily.
But just the raw natural beauty of Iceland can't be explained really.
What's interesting that hasn't really come out in the photos so much here, but the lava flows and the rock patterns were very strange. So there were two different kinds of topography that we were traveling around. One was grass on both sides and a lot of sheep. And then there were
Right.
other times where it was just
Yes.
straight weird rock formations that were caused by lava flows.
Right.
I don't see too many of those in
yes,
these
I
pictures, but
recall. And those rocks were very strange.
Yeah,
yeah.
they were. This is the Glacier Lake. Really amazing place. Glacier
Yeah.
Lake.
We had worked our way all the way over to the southeastern side of the country.
It was so windy, they closed the lake that day and we couldn't get on the boat, unfortunately. So when you'll hear it here in a minute.
That was it was the right decision, but it was a disappointment
You can hear it in the video.
because the wind was so strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wind could really cut right through you, couldn't it? Oh,
Yeah, it
it was
wasn't.
cold.
I still don't think that was the worst it was. Oh, here we are at
This-
Diamond Beach.
This is Diamond Beach. So explain why it's called Diamond Beach. Do you remember the exact reason?
Well, yeah, it's because there are big chunks of ice floating that when the sun's glistening off them, it looks like diamonds floating in the water.
That's right. That's right. I took this photo because I really liked it. It made me feel like the moon. Remember we talked about that? It feels like you're
Yeah,
on
it
the moon.
does look like that.
It looks like you're on the moon here. Yeah,
It
the
does.
Diamond Beach because the ice would float up as you see there. What an amazing place that was. Beautiful.
It was really cool. There was an inlet there that had lots of chunks of ice floating off the glaciers.
Right. Yeah, I don't think the Shibumi would do very well there, Robbie.
No, no.
Yeah.
Doesn't it look like the moon? Oh, here was the guy. He was herding his sheep with a four-wheeler.
This was the other side of the glacier lake.
Yep. These are some of your photos, Robbie. Here we go, ice caving.
Look at the size of that tire. It's to Dad's shoulder.
Yeah.
Those vehicles were really built for off-roading.
Look at Dad making it. He killed it. Hey, Dad, I wanted you to quickly tell a story about our guide and how he said you're his father and he was your third son.
I was thinking about him when I said I liked the people so much. It was everybody, of course, but he was truly a character.
Yes.
And he was very patient with me too when I needed an arm or a hand to get up and over certain rocks. But
Right.
Mostly he was just fun. He had a lot of information, but he was just fun. And so I told him I was going to adopt him.
Right.
And he was all for that. And then he turned to Rob and he said, of course, that means less for you.
Less for me and the inheritance.
That's
Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
If I adopted him and had 3 instead of 2 sons.
And you remember the whole rest of the trip, he kept talking about it all the time. Like, you're going to make sure I'm in your will, right?
Yeah.
Your third son.
Yeah. But that was quite an experience. That was
remember how challenging this hike was? It was a challenging hike.
That was a very big surprise, was how the hike, I thought we would drive more or less right to it. And when the van stopped, I just thought it was right there.
That's right.
And it was a long
Yeah,
hike to get into.
It was probably a good mile over very treacherous rocks.
Man, Rob had his GoPro going. Yeah. Love it.
Yeah, right there was where we climbed down the ladder. One thing that's cool is I saw before we left pictures of blue caves, and I thought that there must be some lighting in there or something. What the guide told us is that it's 120 feet of ice above your head, and the light refracts through it and creates a green and blue color.
Yes. That was one of the coolest experiences was the ice cave.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's the camp we were talking about, the little cabins we stayed in. It was really fun.
Yeah, they were comfortable and warm.
Every morning, remember every morning we'd wake up and we'd hear the sound of sheep baying from somewhere.
Yeah, working farm.
Yeah, it really was.
It was a working farm. But that restaurant, their restaurant at dinner, was obviously the restaurant for the area, not just for people staying there.
That's right.
Because it was terrific food.
Really good.
Yeah.
Really, really good. I thought about that lady who helped us so much, the owner's daughter, and she was about to go work at the Blue Lagoon about a month later. And I've thought about her several times when the Blue Lagoon keeps closing and what kind of impact it had on her. I've thought about her several times.
Had to probably go back home.
She'll go back home, but I bet you tourism kind of struggles when there's not a good, a safe situation going with the volcanoes.
So these are some pictures of that canyon that we were talking about earlier, the Little Grand Canyon. And you can see just how stupendous this carved river is in this rock that had been going for millions of years. It really was an incredible view.
One of my favorite things in the whole trip.
Yeah, really amazing. Look at that. That was
Yeah,
fun
that was
hike.
cool. And there were people there, some hikers who had a GoPro, not a GoPro,
Drone, the drone.
what do you call it, drone,
Yeah,
and it was flying over, and it was really cool to watch them
right.
get some good shots.
This was a cool church in the middle of Vic,
This was back at Vic.
old church. Yeah. That's the town of Vic right there. This
Yeah,
was
it
the
was
beach
rainy
right
and
near Vic.
miserable that day.
Yeah, Rob and I had a good time on this beach. Fun.
Phew. That
Beautiful
was some
black.
weather now.
Yeah. Oh man. You can see
It was
Rob's face
raining.
fucking
It was raining sideways.
see the beach though. It's beautiful. Really beautiful.
Yeah, it was cold and rainy. Those shells worked perfectly though.
You see the birds up here were puffins, weren't they?
Yeah, and this
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
these rock formations were fascinating. There were multiple caves around there, and it
Yeah.
was basalt columns.
Super cool.
This strange
And
mineral.
the sand was really soft. It was like baby sand. This was the one day we had a snow and you had to go. This was Ash and Lauren's first day with us, and we went to that place where they had the first Congress, the first Democratic meeting over here. Very interesting place.
It was
Horrible.
Vatnajökull National Park.
Right. This is where you could stand in the Continental Divide on both continents.
Yes. And the rock
No, I'm
walls
sorry.
were
No, I'm
impressive.
sorry. It was called Thingvellir Park.
In Villiers, yeah.
Thingvellir
Yeah,
National Park. That's what it was called. Sorry about that.
There's
the
Dad with the great geyser.
Thingvellir was their early version of a parliament.
Yes.
Yeah, it was the first parliament in Europe.
Yes, and it
In
was
Europe,
around.
it had met there.
It was around 1000, right? 1000 AD. That's when they met. I don't
Yeah,
remember these.
around 1000.
Yeah, and they
Oh,
got
everyone
together.
else had kings. These people had a parliament.
And what was interesting is they used to, when they would meet and do their votes, Democratic votes, they would all stand the whole time. There was no sitting. You would stand the whole time during the meeting and during the votes. So that's kind of interesting, a standing Congress. So here's
Yeah.
Dad in front of the geyser or geezer sign.
Because the Brits pronounce it a geyser.
Yes, geezer. Yeah.
But
There's
we
the
say
puffin.
geyser, they say geyser. And so the sign was quite appropriate.
This was the national bird of Iceland, the puffin, and you can see it's a really beautiful bird. It has blue and orange on it, almost like an oriole in some ways. Beautiful. You can see all at the geyser location, lots of thermal activity.
Yeah, that's those little pots that
It's
Rob
Ash
was
and Lauren.
talking about that just boil.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. You could stand close enough to it to when the geyser shot off, you could feel a little bit of the spray come down. It was warm, but it wasn't as
A little
hot.
bit. Yeah, a
It
little
cooled
bit.
down pretty dramatically because of how cold the air was.
That was the first one we saw. That was cool. Very cool. Ash and Lauren really enjoyed that day too. There's Gullfoss. This is the one that has the most water of it.
I don't know if it's the most water. I think it's definitely the biggest one though, but
We saw so many beautiful rainbows that day. It was amazing.
yeah.
Yes.
I was impressed with Lauren. She was pregnant during this trip with Shiloh. So
Yep. She never missed a step.
look how powerful.
This kind of reminded me of Niagara Falls or something.
It did,
This
like
powerful.
a smaller version.
Yeah, smaller version. There were two two levels to the falls, which is pretty cool. There was an upper and a lower. Both were pretty spectacular.
Yep. Ashton, you doing NC State?
Yeah.
Dad was always prepared. There's the beautiful rainbows. Wow. Such a beautiful place.
It really was.
Herod.
Carrot Crater.
Yes, yes. It was a beautiful place.
Rob always had the GoPro going. It's the Viking bar. The church.
Yeah, there's that amazing beach.
His dad at the cabin.
Yep.
What an awesome trip, guys. Once in a lifetime.
It was.
There's that ice on the beach at Diamond Beach.
I know.
Grand dude raising a glass.
Yep. What a special trip with the two of you. What did you guys think
It
of that
was
video?
indeed.
Do you
A
think
lot
I
of
do you
work.
think I do you think I
Terrific.
captured it? I mean, I had to go from 950 down to 200. Think I captured it?
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
good.
you did.
I do wish we had gotten better shots of the lava flow rocks along the highway, but
Yeah.
I don't seem to have gotten very many of those for some reason.
Right.
Well, I was driving, but they were
Absolutely.
very prevalent. So it was a big swath of the land we were going by. So I wish that was represented a little bit more in our photos, but it was very cool.
Well, unfortunately, Tori wasn't able to go with us. We did get Ash and Marin. Tori is planning to go at another time. She still has her ticket, a credit for her ticket, so she's planning to go at a different time. But really an amazing trip. Loved going through it with you guys, all the photos, all the great memories. Any final thoughts signing off for people who are thinking about going to Iceland?
Definitely go. The summer, of course, is a lot more tolerable and a lot more people. And the winter is, particularly the wind is really cold, but you do have a chance at least of seeing the northern lights. So it's a trade-off.
True.
I think the summer, if you had enough time, would let you go north.
Absolutely. Totally agree. We mentioned
Which
the
we
things on
wanna do.
the last slide, the things we didn't get done that we'd love to get done next time. So we're planning to do it. Maybe 2025, Robbie, summer 2025.
Maybe so.
Well,
Who
guys,
knows?
thank you so much for joining us today on this special edition of Sports Guys. And Dad, thanks for joining. We're really glad to get your perspective on this special trip.
Yeah.
And
Thanks
I
for
know
putting
you're
it together.
I know you're about to go to Portugal and Spain. I hope you have a blast. And we'll have to put another family
We
trip
are.
together one
And
of these
next,
years.
next January we're going to Asia, going to Southeast Asia.
No way.
Fantastic.
So the next trip that will, if we go back to Iceland, it'll have to be in the summer of 25.
Yep, we're going summer of 25. That's the plan right now. Looking for part 2.
Yep.
Maybe
Gotta go
maybe
north.
maybe Miss J will come with us this time.
Maybe so. I hope so.
And Jess, both J's, Jess and Julie.
Yeah.
J and
All right,
J.
guys. We'll sign it off. Iceland tour.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. Had a great review. And we'll see everybody next time on the Sports Guys. Have a great night.
Yeah. Thanks for putting it together.
See ya.
Absolutely.